Okay. Hi, Ron. It's great to be talking to another Ron.
Yeah, the two Ronnies were already known as. So I
Exactly.
think we're going to
They've
take
already
this on.
branded
Hopefully,
us.
we'll take this on the road.
Exactly. I hope so. Listen, congratulations on the film. It is, as we were saying just before we went on, it's not just the record of a, I guess, largely forgotten rock concert now, but it's a great narrative drama on how a couple of guys, John Brower and Ken Walker, I guess, put this thing together. I suspect, though, that there's a part of the story that has yet to be told, and that's the aftermath of the concert and how you came to be involved in it and why, given what you were able to put together, why it took so long to get this on the screen.
Do you mean why it took me so long to get it on the screen, or why
Well,
just in general it didn't happen?
well, in general,
earlier?
I mean, I presume that the Pennybaker films sat around for years, and I guess the question is why. I mean, with Woodstock coming out, Summer of Soul, I guess it was kind of just discovered as well. But certainly with Woodstock and its popularity, you would have thought somebody would have done something a lot earlier.
Well, it's a great story. It's a great story. I started making the film, in terms of coming up with the idea and starting to put some energies towards it almost 8 years ago. And it was after I had finished my other rock documentary called Who the Fuck is Arthur Fogel?
Right.
Which is another doc about a Canadian who's really was one of the most important individuals in the music business at the time, had done 8 of the top 10 tours of all time. And as a filmmaker and as a Canadian, I love to find Canadian subjects that are have international appeal. I think there's so many films that are made in Canada that never get beyond the borders or never get beyond seen by a few people.
Very true.
And I love making films that inform Canadians more about who they are and what they are and what's happened here in the country, but also tell other people about what has happened in Canada. And I was very successful with that with the Fogel film. It sold in over 54 countries. And I wanted to follow that up with another music documentary. I started off as a musician.
Yes,
I love music and I'm passionate about music. I still am a musician. I still play. But I knew about this concert. I knew John Brower, and I thought this was an amazing story, and I couldn't believe that it had never been told before.
Yeah.
That nobody had said, wow, look at this. Rolling Stone called this the second most important event in rock history. It happened here in Toronto, almost at Yonge and Bloor at Varsity Stadium in 1969. There was a Beatle there. How did that get passed over by the world? And so it really became my mission and my passion to make this film.
Why was it passed over, do you think? I mean, Pennybaker, a world-renowned documentary filmmaker, came up and shot most of the concert, I guess. What happened after the concert that nothing was done?
Yeah, well, clearly within the film, and when you see the film and the narrative, you find out how a lot of these pieces came together. But D.A. Pennebaker heard that there was a concert happening in Toronto that had his biggest heroes. D.A. Pennebaker was famous for having shot Don't Look Back with Bob Dylan and Monterey Pop, and he was the documentarian, one of the greatest documentarians in America, who invented cinema verite, the North American version of cinema verite, of that fly on the wall kind of let the action happen as opposed to making the action happen. And he had 2 very successful films with both of those, but he believed that this concert was going to be his biggest success, his biggest film. He loved and was passionate about the greats of rock who are in in the concert, Chuck Berry and Little Richard, Bo Diddley, Jerry Lee, and Gene Vincent. And he believed that shooting this concert was going to be his biggest success. He came and he shot the concert, and he shot it not like Don't Look Back, but he shot it more like a concert film.
Yes.
He didn't do a lot of the backstage audience and interviews. He didn't do any of that. He really just shot it as a concert film. He cut it into a film. It played in Carnegie Hall once. It played in one other theater, and it was a complete failure. Nobody cared about the film. Nobody was interested in it. And it bankrupted him. He had a partner, Stephen Leacock. They did a lot of films together. It broke up his partnership, bankrupted his company, and so he put all the film in boxes and shipped them off to Iron Mountain, and there they stayed, all this time. So there was never any real interest in the actual film or the performances. He accredited it to the fact at the time that he was ahead of his time with it. He believed that, you know what, the mistake that he made was that thinking that people would care, but because these artists had come and they were no longer in vogue anymore, it was 60s music, it was a whole new rock pop era, they were yesterday's news, but bringing them to this concert again revitalized their careers. They all of a sudden started playing in front of the kids and the youth, and they had a career again. So it was, well, why am I going to go see this movie that Pennebaker did about these people? I'll go see them live somewhere.
Right.
And he sort of accredited that, but he did say that he believed that after they were all gone, his work would be very important. And I went to him when I wanted to do this film, and to get him involved, brought him on as an executive producer, and I believed that this film would be seen by the world, and his work would be seen by the world, and he would get the credit that he deserved for being as visionary as he was at the time to go and shoot the concert. And by the way, when he went to shoot the concert, John Lennon wasn't part of it. He wasn't going because there was a Beatle there. He was going just because these great rockers were there. And it was really my hope that when I launched the film, he'd be there with me and he'd see the audiences responding to the work that he did that's contained in the film. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year and a half ago during the making of the film. So that's a great sadness.
Yeah, no, it's it all integrates so nicely together. How did they? Do you know how they did on the concert? Because they never really followed it up either, did they? Or did they?
You mean did they do well financially?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they ended up doing. Look, they needed 9,000 tickets to break even. They ended up selling over 20,000, so they did quite well at the end of the day on the concert. Though I will say that it also was the end of John Brower and Ken Walker's relationship. This concert, because of things that happened during the course of it, that was the end of their partnership also. So in fact, the concert was the end of Brower and Walker's partnership. The concert was the end of Pennebaker and Leacock's partnership. And the concert was the end of the Beatles. Exactly.
And it was probably the last time I was at a rock concert.
No, that's
or a rock festival.
Festival, that's right. Festival.
Well, little did I know that we talked just before we went on the air that in fact, ironically enough, I was there. But
well, what brought you there? I mean, I'm not supposed to ask you questions, but what did bring you there?
I was there with two other guys, and my memory of the whole thing is standing around and seeing all these beautiful young women and thinking, I'm here with two guys at this concert. What's wrong with me? But the one guy is a guy named Dave Watts, who went on to a fabulous career as a foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times and then as an editor for the Sunday Times. But Dave, as I recall, was a huge rock fan. Not that I wasn't, but he really pushed it. And we had worked, the three of us had worked together at the Oshawa Times, and he wanted to go to this thing. And I think the reason he wanted to go was because of the Doors, who ended up to be, ironically enough, the least interesting act that was
Yeah.
on that night. But we ended up at this thing, and as Geddy Lee says in the documentary, when you're a kid, you don't realize you're standing there at a seminal history moment in rock history. You know, it was, but it was certainly a surprise to see John Lennon there. Although, as you can see in the documentary, Yoko Ono takes over, and it kind of, at the time, I know they presented as art in the documentary, but at the time, where these young goose standing in the audience wondered what the hell was going on. So,
well, I will say, I mean, I presented it as one of the things that I really wanted to communicate in the documentary. One of my objectives was, I believe that Yoko was really vilified, and terribly so. When she first came over to England, I mean, people in the art community knew her as a great artist. In Japan, she was a great artist. She was far ahead of her time, and she was a performance artist, and she was in touch with that creativity, with that energy, and that's one of the reasons why John Lennon loved her as much and respected her as much as he did, because together, she inspired him. She opened his eyes to art forms that he wasn't currently connected to, and also what his potential could be as an artist, to really going inside it and doing more than he had done, was able to do with the band. And her performance, I mean, nobody wanted to hear Yoko Ono at the concert.
That's the problem, of course, yes.
Not a person. They all wanted John Lennon to come and get on stage and sing Beatles songs. And that's what they wanted to hear. So when this woman came out doing what she did at the concert, they were horrified. They were horrified, and they didn't understand it. But I do think that when you hear Klaus Bormann talk about it, when you hear Shep talk about it, and when you hear her talk about it, they actually came because of the greats, and they came to play for peace also. And Toronto and Canada had a very special place in both of their hearts.
Yes.
And they were so committed to that message of peace. That was an integral part of what that performance was about and what she was trying to communicate. And that's a pretty beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, and I think you put it in a lovely context. And as we are all a little more mature now and can appreciate these things a lot more than I probably could at the time. The two things I remember about the concert was, it seemed to be, and surprisingly about seeing your documentary, it seemed to be very small at the time. I don't remember 20,000 people being there. I believe we bought tickets at the door. I don't think he got tickets in advance. I think we got them at the door. I remember being very close to the stage. I don't remember having any trouble getting close to the stage. So it was a pretty easygoing, seemingly not very crowded concert. Although when I see your movie, it looks a heck of a lot more crowded. So,
well, it was 20,000 tickets sold, but it was more than 20,000 people, because there were all kinds of people who were pressing at a gate, like thousands that came, and there was about to be a situation where it could have gone south. And so they opened the gates at that point. They went, you know what, we've made enough money. We're done fine. Open the gates and let those people in, which was sort of the
maybe that's
of the time.
Yeah, well, maybe that's how we got in then.
Well, they were selling tickets at the gate, but they did absolutely. They were selling tickets in advance for weeks and weeks before, which is how they knew that the concert was bombing, because nobody was buying any tickets.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was Woodstock was going on at what, just the month
about
before?
a month and something before, yes.
But that doesn't seem to have played a part in Festival 69 at all. That didn't seem to inspire anything.
Well, you're talking about the festival that they did before this one? I think there was just the 2-day festival you're talking about
Yes.
now.
Well, no, I'm
Yeah.
talking about, but did they, well, I guess since the Woodstock Festival, it was just the month before, I guess there wasn't enough time to be too inspired by.
Well, no, there was the Woodstock Festival, which was a month and something before, and then there was Pop 69, which was a 2-day festival that Brower and Walker put on,
Right.
that had the band, that had Johnny Winter, that had Sly, that had Dr. John, it had all kinds of incredible artists at a 2-day festival. And then it was the success of that festival that where they went, boy, we got to do another one before the summer's over. And they did it in early fall. But they ran up against the fact that it was no longer summer. Kids were going back to school. Parents didn't want their kids, going out to concerts. The Doors were up on obscenity charges, and Toronto's very provincial. Parents didn't want their kids to go see someone who had recently purportedly exposed himself on stage. So they had a whole myriad of problems which affected ticket sales and made kept everyone guessing as to whether or not this concert would actually even happen.
It's quite amazing what they pulled off. As a former promoter yourself, would you have ever set out to do this?
Oh yeah, no, I think we were talking earlier about being a creative and being a promoter. I mean, when you're a promoter, you do things that you're passionate about, that you believe in, and you hope that other people are going to trust your instincts in some cases, and that there are others like you. So, I mean, I promoted all kinds of shows, and I put myself on the line, and I won some, lost some, broke even on some, but yes, that's what you do as a promoter, and especially back then. One of the things that I think is so special about the film and what I wanted the film to do and be, and I think it communicates it. It's a bit of a time capsule. This
Yes.
film takes you back to a time. It's not just about watching the festival or just about the narrative that happens, but it's, oh my God, this is what actually could happen in a time. Like right now, you've got Live Nation, you've got AEG,
Yes.
you've got corporate rock, you've got lawyers and accountants running record labels and making A&R decisions. And the world is what the world is now. You could never have I mean, how could you imagine, like I was, in the Fogel film, I was on the road with U2 on the 360 tour, the amount of security around Bono and the gang to try and get to them and try and communicate is more than the president of the United States has. So, could you imagine in this day and age, someone actually picking up the phone and calling, hey, Bono, I'm doing this concert here in Toronto and they've got these guys playing and want you to come down. You go, oh yeah, that's great. You know what? I'm going to come down, but I'm not going to bring you two. I got a couple of friends. I'm going to just call them up, put them together. We're going to get on a plane. We'll come. We've never played together before, but we'll jump up on stage and we'll play in front of 25,000 people with the kind of brand image and everything that people have now. This could never have happened. And what those promoters did, the kind of audacity and the kind of conviction that they had, that doesn't exist now. It's all gone so corporate. So it is sort of a magical time where you see so many magical things happen around that festival, with the artists, with the music, with their passion, seeing the rockers, seeing Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Bo Diddley, all of those guys. This is the only time that those 5 artists shared a stage together.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
And they had been basically put out to pasture. They were playing small clubs, they were playing Holiday Inns and stuff like that. The ski circuit in Vegas. And all of a sudden, here they were. Someone invited them to jump on a stage with, somewhere between 20 and 25,000 people and play to an audience. And each one of those artists saw themselves as the king of rock and roll. So what you see so much in those performances is they go out and they put it all on the table. There's such passionate performances, and each one of them is performing because they're performing. Chuck is performing for Jerry Lee. He's performing for Little Richard. He's performing for Gene Vincent and Bo Diddley. Each one of them is trying to prove that they are, in fact, the kings of rock, the king of rock. And it's amazing performances and amazing passion.
Well, the absolute jaw-dropping part of the movie is getting John Lennon on a plane to come to Toronto at 24 hours notice. And you're absolutely right. Can you ever imagine trying to pull that off today? I mean, it's just
Who would do that?
And even back then, it was. I mean, to say the Beatles were the #1 band in the world at that point, and to get Lennon on a plane overnight to come. I mean, it's and I presume they were they paid? Do you know if they were even paid for the
$265? The Plastic Ono band got. Yeah, it wasn't about money.
No, obviously
John loved playing. He loved rock. I mean, he came because these artists who were there were his gods. They're the people who inspired him to become a musician, inspired so much of the music that he actually wrote. And he wanted to be on stage with them. You know, he wanted to be there. He wanted to be on stage. He wanted to meet them. He wanted to be part of that. And it says, it says so much about John Lennon. It says so much about the musicians of that era. At the same time, they were much more inclined to get together and say, yeah, I'll get together, I'll play with this guy, we haven't played before, but we'll jam. It was sort of much looser, and it's something that some of the, that the kids have certainly seen with some of the bands that have come along that are jam bands, where they sort of idolize them because they'll go and they won't just play the record. They'll go and they'll do what the bands used to do and surprise you. That's the beauty of music. It's the beauty of artists and musicians getting together. So, and certainly, the Plastic Ono band was surprised they had never played the material that they played.
Yes, I didn't realize that.
Ever. No rehearsals, no nothing.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Standing there at the time, I had no idea Eric Clapton was part of the band. So. It's amazing.
I actually think that Eric maybe had no idea he was part of the band at the time, but that's another story.
How much trouble did you have, given the corporate nature of rock and music these days? How much trouble did you have getting everybody together to talk about the concert and to talk about their experiences?
Well, it's always a challenge, because everybody, I mean, all of these people get asked, numerous times a week to talk to somebody somewhere in the world about something. I'm talking about all of these artists. Their dance cards are very full, and the last thing they want to do is add another interview to it. So, but I think being a musician doesn't hurt. Having the background that I have doesn't hurt. Making the films that I made doesn't hurt. And being passionate about the subject, certainly, I will say it was difficult. It didn't come together quickly. There are people, I mean, Anthony Fawcett, who I found in the film, was one of the gems of this that I ran into. I knew about him. I went online. There isn't an interview with Anthony Fawcett that exists, and he lived with John and Yoko between 68 and 71, and was with them 24/7. And the last thing he did was publish a book in 1985, I think it was, that had limited copies and then disappeared. So it took me almost a year. I finally tracked him down. He was in London. I asked him to interview. He said, no, I have no interest in doing it. Not going to do it. But we got along really well on the phone. We just talked about other stuff. And then we ended up talking. And over the next year, probably talked to him 50 hours, 60 hours on the phone. And one day he just went, you know what? I'll interview. I'll do it. And so I said, great. I'm coming to England. And I quickly put together the shoot, going to Munich to shoot Klaus Warman, and then going to get Anthony. But he was just incredible. I mean, his story is, he was like a zealot in the industry. He knew everybody in the art world. He knew everybody in the music world. He knew everybody in architecture. He was one of the most erudite raconteurs that I have ever run into in my life. He's just an amazing, amazing character.
Well, he's one of the gems in the film. I mean, he's certainly, in terms of the Lennon stuff, he just kind of links everything together, and he's such a raconteur and such a character. And I love the fact you included that he wanted to make sure he had his glass of wine before he started the interview.
He was, you know what, he was nervous. I was driving him to the interview, and he was nervous because he hadn't been interviewed. I mean, this is a guy who hadn't been interviewed.
Wow.
And, you know, God knows when. And he had agreed to do it, but then he was like feeling nervous. He said, you know what, do you think we could pick up a bottle or two of wine just so I can relax a bit? I just, you know, have a drink and cool out. So we stopped at a local supermarket, went in, grabbed a couple of bottles of wine, and you know, it just made, he looked so good with a glass of wine. I said, you know what, we should shoot him while he's drinking.
Great face, great get, as they say. That
was a great get.
So, what are you working on now, Ron?
You mean other than this interview?
Yes.
Right. No, well, right now,
you know work.
I am focusing a fair bit just on this film and getting it to the world. We're just getting ready for the international launch of the film, which is going to be happening in March. I can't announce it yet, but it's coming up, and so that requires quite a bit of time and effort right now. I'm a producer on the film as well as the director, so you know, it's important to me that the film gets out, and that's pretty exciting. And there's a lot going on with that right now. But I have about 4 projects that I'm working on, and God knows which one, you know, if any, will go forward, and which one will get financed first. It's harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to make films, and it's harder and harder and harder and harder to get financing for films for a wide variety of reasons that, you know, I don't think we need to go into now. But let's just say that, you know, even getting a film made is so challenging for a filmmaker these days. Getting it funded is so challenging. I mean, if you look at this film, in the funding, I had a BC co-producer, I had a French co-producer, I had Arte in France and Germany who helped, I had Crave here in Canada, I had Telefilm, I had the CRA, I had Photon distributors, and I had Myriad distributors internationally. That's what it took to put it together. And
well,
so
however you did it, Ron, it was certainly worth it. It's what was in Pennebaker's time, a bunch of has-beens that nobody wanted to see on film anymore has become and has, you know, and a piece of rock history, and just beautifully told and shot. So, and thank you for going to work with us and spending some time to talk about the film and letting us show the film at the Milton Film Festival. It's
my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Just so happy. You know, you create something, you want it to be seen. So I'm so indebted to all those people who work so hard at festivals. You know, I mean, you have to watch so many films and do so much work, and all of the people who give their time. It's just it's a great thing for us filmmakers because it's very much a foundation. And you know, you go out. I followed the film to a lot of festivals. And that's really how you get, I don't know how you get a sense anymore. I released 2 films during COVID, and it was the strangest experience for me, you know, because they just went directly to television. The premiere was not at a theater. There was no red carpet. There were no cameras. There was no audience. There was myself and my wife on the couch, you know, having craft dinner. Not really, but, you know, and that was the launch of the film. And it just goes out into the ether, and it's very strange, you know. Film, like concerts, you know, really feels like a group experience, and having a theater full of people responding to a film and is just magical. So I'm so happy that people are back in the theaters again.
Well, I'm delighted too, and you know, I still, my wife and I still go to the movies. Although these days, the kind of movies we go and see, we're the only ones sitting in the theater. I mean,
or you mean you're not going to see the movies with the guys in tights?
Exactly. And so, and you know, it's you know, with all the streaming, as much as I love much of it, and particularly during COVID, but they've become consumables. You know, you used to get really excited about going to a movie, and
Yes.
now you just kind of consume this stuff.
No, it's just, you're absolutely right. It's just, no, it's like television. It's not like movies. It's like television because that's the medium and that's the delivery system. And it's not even that. Some people are watching it on their computers. They're not even watching on a big screen. Or they're watching, on their phones or on their iPads. There is nothing like being in a theater with a huge screen with a sound system or surround sound system. That's, when you make a film, I didn't finish the film on a small screen. I finished the film and mixed it in a big theater and and finished it on a big screen because that's how it's meant to be presented. And, yes, it's, clearly people are going to see it on television. They can see it on smaller screens, but that's what they're made for. That's what they're made for. And that's how they present the best. And that is better than anyone. That's the film experience.
Very much so. And although I never got to see Revival69 on a big screen, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm just so impressed with what you've done. So again, Ron, thanks so much for talking to us. It's great to connect with you, and good luck with the film as you go along.
Well, and great talking to you, a legend. So fantastic to meet you finally.
Well,
I wish you all the best.
Well, right back at you, kiddo. So this is it for the two Ronnies.
Well, at least we're laughing.
Exactly. So I will cut us off at this point, I guess, and thank you again. So
wonderful. Thank
take
you
care.
so much. I wish you all the best.
You too.